Welcome to today's talk. My name is Carolyn Woods from InEight. Today we have a leadership topic in estimating, create consistent estimates for less risk and more profit. I'd like attendees who are participating live to go ahead and type any questions in the question box in the chat window, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of today's webinar. I'd like to introduce Aaron Cohen. Aaron is the Estimate Product Manager at InEight, and he's a certified professional constructor. Aaron joined InEight after 8 years as the AGC lecturer at ASU, Arizona State University, where he still teaches courses on estimating and project controls. Prior to joining ASU, Aaron served for 10 years as the president and owner of Apollo Trenchless, an engineering and construction services provider specializing in the application of trenchless technologies for municipal construction projects. Aaron still regularly consults with various owners and engineers regarding the constructability of underground utility infrastructure projects. Please welcome Aaron Cohen.
Thank you, Carolyn. So good afternoon, everybody. At least I believe it's afternoon for most of us. What we're going to talk about today is the consistency with estimates, or creating some standardization with your estimating process. But before we dive into that, I wanted to take a moment just to talk a little bit about framing the problem that we have here. So many of you may have seen this before. This is a study that's done on a regular basis by the Associated General Contractors. They, at least once a year do an economic outlook. This was done, I want to say, in late 2018. And what you can see here is this is some different graphs with regard to construction spending in our marketplace and with regard to employment. And if you go back to at least here in the States, our recession really kind of took hold in 2008. And what you're seeing now is you're seeing that there's been a steady climb from that point forward, and we're almost back to, in a lot of cases, our pre-recession levels. So why is that important? What does that mean? Well, for many of us, it means that there is a lot of work out there. We're seeing a lot of demand for construction, for spending, for building, not only infrastructure, but for commercial building, industrial, all the different sectors. And that means for many of us that are in the construction business, we're in a growth mode. So wanted to talk just a little bit about what being in a growth mode means. Everybody thinks, yes, this is great. We're going to do more work than we did last year. We're going to be able to make more money. Many times growth often comes with a substantial amount of risk. And if you're not growing in a slow and controlled manner, you put your company in jeopardy of potentially going out of business. So Thomas C. Schleifer, who is an expert in the turnaround business, has been in the industry for a number of years. One of the things that he's always said is that most companies will go out of business while they're climbing up out of the recession, not while they are in the recession. And there's a number of reasons for that when you actually stop and think about it. But when you're increasing your volume, when you're doing more work than what you've done before, what that typically means is you have higher working capital requirements. So what happens when we start doing more work? We're buying more pickup trucks, we're hiring more people, we're doing more things and spending more money than we have in the past. What that then often equates to is we wind up doing more work and we wind up seeing larger volumes. We wind up seeing, bank account balances that, hopefully are going up. But we might not always necessarily recognize that we're doing the work at lower margins. We get stuck in a rut where we think that just doing a higher volume of work, we're going to turn that corner and all of a sudden we're going to start making money, at the levels that we want to be making. And we're just in this growth mode right now where we have to, spend a lot to get to that point. The reality of what happens is you wind up taking on more risk as a company. You do more work, you do bigger work, you do jobs that maybe you haven't done before. You start doing work that is outside of your area. You start doing work with people that aren't as experienced as the people that you had when you were, doing work at a lower level of volume. So what winds up happening is, as a company, you're taking on more risk for less return. So it's very, very important that as you're growing your business, that you're doing it in a smart way so that you're not opening yourself up to undue risk. So, are you growing your business? One of the things that we want to explore today is, as you're growing your business, what are some of the ways that you can do that to help ensure profitability? Now, one smart man once told me a long time ago that there's 3 things that construction companies have to do and have to do well if they're going to survive. They have to be able to bid work, they have to be able to build the work that they got, and then they have to be able to get paid for that work. So we're going to focus really today on the first step of growing a business, which is going to be bidding the work. So if we want to grow our volume, we want to bid more work, what does that mean? Does that mean taking all the estimators that we currently have? Maybe you're a small company and you've got one person that does all the estimating, does all the project management. Maybe you're a large organization where you have a team of people. Doesn't really matter. That infrastructure that you have in place is probably capable of doing a certain amount of work. So if you want to take and scale that department up and you want to do more work, are you doing more work with the same people? You can. The reality of it is there's only so many hours during the day, and if you start trying to ask your estimator that maybe is used to doing $20 million of work in a year to now do $30 million of work, chances are his estimates are going to be less accurate. There's going to be more, you're going to have to get through each estimate faster, there's going to be less accuracy with them. Likewise, if you scale by hiring people, it's very hard to hire people that come into your business and intuitively know all the ins and outs of how you do business and how you become successful over the years. So many times you have to train your estimators to understand, how your business works. So there's a risk associated with, increasing and scaling up on the amount of work that you can do by hiring people. In any one of these cases, when you start scaling up, one of the things that can happen is you lack standardization and you start introducing all sorts of problems into the process. So not only do you have potentially inconsistent estimating and pricing techniques if you have multiple people that are doing things in different ways, you also have the difficulty of ensuring that your estimates are accurate. The amount of quality that goes into each estimate could potentially be degraded if you have one person trying to do more than what they're capable of, or multiple people looking at jobs in different ways. For the people that are, running a estimating department or a division, it can become hard to manage that process where you take your estimators and you go through the process of figuring out, okay, the job that they've just estimated, what's the process that you go through to ensure that they've got an accurate estimate, to make sure that the price they came up with is one that your company feels comfortable with. When different estimators are estimating projects in different ways, and that process has to be different for different jobs, then that can become, very challenging for the manager that's responsible for the department to be able to effectively go through that bid review process without feeling inclined to have to dig down into each and every estimate to find potential errors and mistakes. It's more difficult to hand the project over to the field when you have different estimators that are estimating projects in different ways. That transition of how the project was estimated and what the assumptions are that went into the different numbers, what the productivity rates need to be from job to job to job. If there's consistency, it's going to be easier to hand over to the field a project with a budget that can be built for a profit. So being able to standardize on your estimating practices makes that transition or that handover to your field personnel go much smoother. And then finally, when you don't have a standardization to the way that you're estimating, you increase the risk that you're bidding your projects with the wrong price. And in our business, it's incredibly cost competitive, as many of you know. And it's not just enough to go in there with the cheapest price, but you have to have the most competitive price with a budget that allows you to still make money so that we can be successful. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this to make profit, right? So those are some of the problems that you have with a lack of standardization in your organization, specifically with regard to your estimating process. What we want to do now is take a look at some of the challenges that lack of standardization will have, the impact that it'll have on your business, and some of the ways that you can go about, solving some of those issues. So first off, we want to try and avoid the use of unstructured data. Now, as you guys can see up here, we have Microsoft Excel, which is the Swiss Army knife of our any estimator that is able to use this to codify their business logic, to do takeoff, to figure out how to estimate, to quantify, to do the different things that you need to do. Many companies only use Excel for all of their estimating process, which is perfectly fine. But it does create with it some challenges, or does carry with it some challenges when you start looking at trying to scale your business and trying to have multiple people estimate different work in the same way. So while Excel is tremendously flexible, and I would never try to suggest that you get rid of Excel, that would just be ridiculous. There are challenges, and there are appropriate places to use it, because the flexibility that it brings with you also makes it very challenging to have consistent estimating processes. So let me show you an example of some of the dangers that you can get into when using Excel, specifically when we start using multiple users, or we have other estimators that are coming in and starting to use the existing business process. So this is a Excel sheet that is a concrete box culvert takeoff. So this was based on Arizona Department of Transportation standard specifications, which I don't believe have really changed since maybe the 1980s as far as this type of work is concerned, or at least changed in any substantial way. So what this is an incredibly complex spreadsheet that has a lot of different calculations that are being run based upon different inputs that the user puts in here, so they can choose the type of box that they're doing. They can choose what table that it's coming from based upon the amount of fill. And what you'll see is, as I'm making these changes here, you'll see that there's the variables down here are changing in response to these different answers that I'm putting in here. This is all driven with a number of different calculations, and you can see that any one place in here, if you had to recreate this stuff on every job, would really be a headache, right? So what a lot of companies do is they'll create things like this, and not this particular one, but they will, have a standard way of estimating, and they'll use this over and over again for common types of work. One of the challenges that we have here, and I'm just going to show you here, this is a 270-foot long box, and we can come down here, and this is just some, based on plug rates, so don't hold me to any of these numbers, but we can see that we've generated for this box culvert a $53,000 cost. If I were to come up here and I were to change this, and let's just say this is going to be 350 feet now, we can see that we've now come to close to $70,000 a cost, right? So almost double, or not quite double what we had in there. But you'll also notice that if I were to come in here and start interrogating the sheet further, there's some different things that I could do in different places. If I wanted to come in and say, for example, I changed this box length and I put this at 200, this would now maybe drive some of these calculations down here, but unbeknownst to me, I just broke my link because this number was calculated based on things over here and not there. So what we want to do is we want to put that back to where it was. We want to, make sure that it'd be very easy to make a mistake like that. And one of the challenges that we have is when we use other people's spreadsheets and we don't intuitively understand how they work, we open ourselves up to a tremendous amount of risk that some of the standard processes and procedures that we follow can get lost in translation there. So, so what you can do with a system that's designed to ensure some sort of consistency across your estimating processes, we can use templates, for example, which is going to help save time, reduce variation in your estimates. And essentially, when you're moving away from the flexibility of a spreadsheet where you can do anything that you want to, essentially basically recreating that wheel every time, and you start moving to a system that's going to have more of a rigid structure to it, you're enforcing some business rules that need to take place in order to ensure that estimates are done repeatably and consistently over and over again. So templates are a great way of being able to do that, and we're going to show an example here of a template. We're going to use InEight estimate to create a job from a template. So I'm simply going to click on my template button, and what this will do is this will launch a selection register, which is going to give me some different types of templates that I can choose from. So as an organization, I can create a number of different, hold on a second here. We've got, Here we go. I had lost my selection register underneath my PowerPoint presentation. So as an organization, I can have a number of different types of projects that I work on, and any one of these projects could be structured differently. So in this example, we're going to choose the infrastructure project, and I'm going to click OK, and let's just do my new project for the time being. And when I create this estimate from a template, what it's going to do is it's going to pull in automatically some common high-level information that I know is going to be typical with every infrastructure project that I do. And I'll give you an example here. If we take a look at the project cover sheet, once this has opened up, we can see here that I've automatically assigned Aaron Cohen as the estimator, so we know this job's going to, be well estimated with that. But I can also go, for example, and take a look at my estimate structure. And by just creating the estimate, I've automatically got some common elements that I want to make sure are included in every one of my infrastructure jobs. So I automatically have a general requirements item in here. I'm automatically pulling in things like project supervision and mobilization. I've got a prime bond that's in here, and it's set up at specific rates. If I wanted to go and I wanted to see the standard markups I have for infrastructure type projects, I could do that as well, and I can make sure that these rates are maintained at consistent levels across all these projects, so that when an estimator comes in and creates a job, he doesn't have to recreate all of this information time and time again and potentially lose any of that information in the process of creating it. Another really great benefit of having a system that's going to help standardize your estimating process is going to be the use of resource rates or resource library. So one of the main components of an estimate, we as estimators very often understand that the way that we build the wall over the years really hasn't changed all that much. My productivity rates might not be all that different, but depending on where I build that wall and who I use to build it, my labor rates could change significantly from geographic area to area. And while the same type of work as I scale my business and start moving into different areas, might principally be the same, there's going to be inherently different cost impacts to that work. Not only labor, but material as well, right? So what we can do with the resources, and I'll show you an example here, is if I were to come to my new project and I wanted to look at the different types of resources that I have, I'm going to choose my labor rate, and I'm going to see that I've got labor rates that are built up in here for different geographic areas. Now, these areas are taken from prevailing wage rates for the area that you're working in. You can set these up however you like. But let's just, as an example, I'm going to choose Maricopa County, Arizona, and I'm going to import these resources. And since I already had a couple resources in there, it's going to ask me if I want to overwrite those, and I'll say yes. And what we can do now is if I go to take a look at my labor resources, we can see that I have automatically pulled in a number of different types of resources based upon the Maricopa County wage rates. And let's go and, for instance, I'm going to take a look at my truck drivers, and let's just say that if I were to create an item in my estimate, and I'm going to add a material delivery item. And I'm just going to do this real quick because I want to show you the difference here. If I wanted to drag that resource rate in, and I'm going to take my truck driver and I'm going to drag him here. I'm now using this truck driver on my material delivery cost item, and I'm going to just quantify this real quick, and I'm going to say that this activity is going to take 4 hours. So when I plug in my hours per unit of measure, we've now got here. We can see that I've got a $15.53 per hour, $62 for this particular truck driver, which is all fine and good. You could very easily do that in you know, on a spreadsheet or, you know, on a side calculation. But where the real benefit comes here is if I wanted to, say, for instance, take this same job and then I wanted to move to a different part of the state. And let's just say, for example, that I don't want to use this. I want to do this project in Yuma, Arizona. Let's see, I'm going to turn these off just to make the import a little bit quicker. And I import these based on Yuma. It's going to ask me if I want to overwrite these rates. And what we will see is, after I do that import, we've now got truck drivers that are based on wage rates from Yuma, Arizona, instead of Maricopa County, and I've got different rates for those. And what's really cool is if I come back to my estimate, I can see that that $15 an hour rate automatically got updated to a $20 an hour rate. So just by very easily re-importing those resource rates, we can leverage a lot of the same work that we've done, and in a very intelligent way, we can reuse that based on, you know, existing labor rates or material rates or however you wanted to set your estimate up to track that. So not only do we have the ability to do that with rates, but we can also reuse the work that we've done in other estimates. So rather than going in and recreating the wheel every time, we can now pull up old jobs, we can compare them, we can pull information in from another job. So just go through a real quick example of that. I've got my new job that I've created, which really doesn't have any work in it right now other than the general requirements, but I'm going to go and I'm going to open up my training job. And what this will do is this will have a, you know, this is a fully blown estimate on something that I've done in the past, and I'll be able to pull information in from this job. And if I drag this over, we can go side by side. Let's say that I've got a manhole that I wanted to install on this. I can see I did 16 manholes on this job, so I'm going to simply grab this, I'm going to drag it over, I'm going to drop it onto the new estimate that I created here, and we can see that I've got my manholes in here. Let me drag these out of the way. I'm going to simply change this. I don't have 16 manholes on this job. I copy that over from the training job, but I'm going to change this to be, let's say, 5 manholes. And what it'll do is it'll ask me, you sure you want to make that change? I'm going to change your costs accordingly, and what it did is it automatically updated. So now I've got the $3,200 in this job based on the installation of those manholes based on this job's current labor rates that it's using. Another way that I could also pull information in to this job is instead of just using another job to as a reference to pull information in, I could also use what we have is known as the bid wizard. And what this will do is this will allow me to maintain a library of common types of work that I use in my organization. So let's just go over to our bid wizard, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I've got a new project that I want to add to. And this is going to ask me what I want to import. I'm going to say that I want to import a cost item. And then what I want to do is I want to select my source job that I'm importing from. And what we've got in here is a standard set of libraries for different types of work that are common in my organization. So I'm going to pull some work in from my underground pipe library. I'm going to click OK. And what this will do is this will load up for me a list of all the items that I have that are fully quantified. There's resources associated with them. There's productivity rates that are associated with them. And what I can do then is I can search through this list, and as I just kind of scan through this, you'll be able to see that you've got a absolute ton of all this information in here. So let's say that I want to pull in some PVC pipe. I'm going to simply come up here, type PVC. And this brings me down to the section of the library where it's referencing PVC pipe. So I've got less than 10 inch, less than 5 feet. Let's say that this is going to be a 6 foot deep cut. I'm going to grab this one. So we're going to grab this item, and it's going to include all of its subordinate items, handle the material, excavate the trench, install the pipe, backfill. Once I click OK, or once I click Finish, this will then import into my job that fully quantified scope of work. And now it's just a matter of going in and updating my quantities. So I'm going to say that this is going to be 1,500 linear feet. We'll click OK, and now this is going to give me a fully quantified estimate, with resources, with productivity rates. And as an estimator, now I can spend more time analyzing the work and figuring out if the rates that I'm using are appropriate, if the quantities I have are accurate, and I don't have to spend as much time recreating this entire structure and thinking about things like what crew should I use and what should be the productivity rates. Taking the concept of a library one step further, one thing that we can do is we can use assemblies to also create common scopes of work. So an assembly is going to be more of an intelligent library where it's going to allow you to not only pull in a type or the scope of work, but it's also going to ask you some questions. And based upon the answers to your questions, it's going to give you a better quantified answer to the question of how much is it going to cost me to do that type of work. So if I were to go over to my training job, we have an example in here of a assembly. And if I were to click on this link, this is for a retaining wall assembly. This is going to pop up a dialog that's going to ask me a bunch of questions. So I've already employed this assembly into this job, and you can see that it's based on these different parameters, right? This is a wall that's going to be 4,500 feet long. It's going to have a 3 1/3 foot wide footing. The thickness is going to be almost 10 inches. We've got a average wall height, as the wall may, vary over the distance of 4,500 feet. So we put an average in there. I can choose the strength of concrete. Let's just say that I wanted to adjust my footing and change it to 5 feet wide. And what you'll notice happens down here is I make that change. Now all of a sudden my 850 cubic yards became 1,070 cubic yards. So as I change these values and these parameters, the assembly is intelligently figuring out what all these quantities should be. So the estimator doesn't have to do that same math over and over again. All of these formulas here are things that the estimator can determine themselves and can create this logic, and very similar to what you had in the Excel sheet that we just looked at. They can create all this business logic that determines, how they estimate quantities and how they estimate values for their work, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit OK, and what this will do is now re-employ that assembly in my estimate, update everything, and now we can see that it's no longer 850 cubic yards, it's now 1,070. As you scale your business, one of the things that becomes a challenge, especially for the managers of an estimating department, is going to be to ensure that the estimators that you have working for you are all estimating in a consistent manner. And more importantly is understanding that the stuff that you expect them to include in an estimate is indeed included. There's a lot of different ways that you can potentially make an error in an estimate. And the bid review process is very key element in trying to help capture those things before the price is finalized and we enter a job with a price that's the incorrect price, right? So, these systems tend to have ways that are built into them to help you find things like that. If we go to, for example, my training job, and I'm going to run a report, and I'm going to look at my audit report, and what this will do is this will be the way that I can look at my estimate and kind of look for those high-level things that, just may have slipped by. For example, I may have started estimating certain costs, or at least certain scopes of work that I didn't put a cost in there for yet. So what you'll wind up seeing is that when you come through this report, you're going to get a list of the cost items that don't have a value associated with them. Oh, wait, I got to go in here, I got to slab on grade, I got to buy concrete, I got to do certain things in here. I'm not carrying dollars in my estimate for those things, right? So unassigned cost items relative to whether you have them assigned to pay items or not. So these are going to be potentially things, should this list of things actually be what's our general requirements and what's contributing to our overhead and our markup for profit and overhead. So, gives you a more of a concise way of looking at some of those things to make sure that you are capturing all the things that you intend to and want to capture. And lastly, one of the most powerful things about moving towards more of a structured data system for your estimating process is the ability to leverage the data in your organization, specifically historical data, so that you can, what we call, benchmark your estimates or look at things and say, for instance, okay, I've estimated this particular scope of work at a certain productivity rate or a certain dollar per unit. And basically ask the question, hey, dummy, you've never done something like that before in the history of your company, or at least at that particular productivity rate. What makes you think you can do it on this particular job right now? So let me jump back over to the product, and I'm going to open up a job that I've got some benchmark data in. And what we'll do is we'll see that we have the ability to take a certain scope of work, and whether it's going to be based on an account code or based on some sort of a coding system, we can go look at a library of other jobs that we have estimated in the past, and ultimately other jobs that you have actually performed on in the past. And then you can take that information and you can compare it to what your current estimate is. And especially for an organization where you've got new people that are coming into the business, you've got a junior level estimator, he's got some promise and some potential, but he might not necessarily know everything that he doesn't know yet. He doesn't know which questions to ask. This can be tremendously beneficial to help them understand if they're at least in the right ballpark. So this is a cost item that I've opened up for the excavation, 50,000 cubic yards of excavation in this particular job. And we can see that it's comprised of all of the equipment and the labor, the operators, the foremen, the scrapers, the dozer, all the different equipment that's going to go into building this out. A little benchmark screen over here, I can see that I've got an average price, which is sitting here in this middle part, which is about $3.57. And we can see the variation, as we get up into the higher end, a little bit above $4 a unit or a little bit down towards the $3 a unit, we can see that we've got some red bands in here, which are, flagging me that, hey, this is getting on the outer bounds of what would be, normal for this type of work. The little white triangle here is my existing estimate, right? So we can see that my $3.23 per unit rate, while it's a good price, it's maybe a little bit aggressive. Do I feel comfortable that I can do this? I can look at other benchmarkable jobs, and I can see that this is where we stood on any one of these jobs at any one particular time. One of the really cool things about this feature is I can come back into my overall estimate, and when everything is coded out correctly and you have this benchmarkable data, I can go to a benchmark view, and I can very easily, quickly at a glance, see all the items in my estimate that might be in or out of compliance with what a benchmarkable data set could be. I could even simply sort this column, and now I can look at the areas that I might want to spend the most amount of time, reviewing and saying, hey, do we feel comfortable with these numbers? I'm not too sure that this is, within the realm of possibility. And if I've got a lot of variance compared to other work that I've either estimated or actually performed in the past, this gives me really good visibility into being able to determine that. Okay, so in conclusion, there are a number of benefits that come along with the ability to standardize your estimating processes, not the least of which are maintaining consistency in the way that you're estimating and pricing your work. But it also is going to go a long ways to help ensure that your estimates are accurate, specifically when you get more people or newer people in the process that maybe don't know everything that they need to know to be an efficient estimator. It's going to make the bid review process more manageable for those of you that are actually managing a department of estimators. specifically trying to handle people that are coming in and learning and getting them up to speed so that they can become efficient. It's going to make this easier to hand a budget over to the field so that they understand what assumptions went into the estimate, and so the field can in turn provide feedback to the office as far as when you're estimating the next job. How do you go about actually improving the estimating process? And ultimately, we want to make sure that this is driving toward the goal of making sure we bid the work at the right price. Bidding work at the right price means that we're not going to be too high so that we're not competitive and we don't have a chance to get the work, but we also don't want to be too low so that if we do get the work, we still have the ability to make a reasonable profit. That entails a lot of detail and a lot of understanding very specifically of the work that's involved and managing those risks appropriately. We're able to bid more work, we're able to get more work, we're able to drive volume, and then we can go on to building work and getting paid. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. I'd like to, at this point, turn it back over to Carolyn and open it up to the audience for any questions that you might have.
And if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the question box. Well, thank you very much, Erin, and thank you to everyone who joined on our live broadcast today. This concludes today's talk, Create Consistent Estimates for Less Risk and More Profit.